All right, folks. Well, here we are again doing another instructional video, something we haven't done together in quite some time. Um, so it'll be a little fun here, I think, to bust some of the rust out and give this a go here one more time. They seem to be kind of popular before, so I thought maybe we'll dive back into it a little bit. Um, so every now and then, I've noticed that older breeches drafting video I made some years back here for the channel. It'll resurface, somebody will find it, and I guess they'll like it or comment on it or however the algorithm works, and then the thing sort of shuffles back, into service on the page, and more people will find it and interact with it, which is very cool. That's why we made it, and I'm very happy that people get to use the information that was in there. And then inevitably, people will shoot me messages, and I'll field some questions about some of the things they saw in the video, which again makes me very happy. That was the point of the video, and I'm always very happy when people send me their questions, and we're able to help people achieve whatever goal it is that they want to achieve. So I thought tonight maybe what we could do is we'll do an updated version of the drafting video. What I had made before was kind of just meant to be sort of a fun little, let's kind of do a real basic demonstration of drafting. It wasn't really what I do when I cut a pair of breeches for somebody. So I thought tonight maybe I'll show you what it is I actually do. For those of you who are aware of my intent to make a sort of little pamphlet on how I draft patterns, this will sort of be a sneak peek into the breeches section of that. That is still coming. I promise it is. Life is what it is, and priorities are what they are, and this is always a low priority on the totem pole of priorities. So progress does slowly get made. It will happen eventually. I promise. I won't die before I get that published. That's just going to happen. But anyway, so tonight we'll get to work off of what you're seeing in front of you now, which is one of the sort of rough draft plates that will be digitized and put into the pamphlet. We'll talk about what measurements you need to work with, and then we'll do a quick step by step through how do you achieve what's on this plate here. And this is actually what I do when I cut breeches for people. I will say that 85 to 90% of the time, it's pretty trouble-free if you measure well. Measuring is going to be the key detail here. It's really the big skill I've found anyway with using this system for drafting breeches. If you don't measure well, or you don't understand how a measurement should be taken, you will find yourself in a little bit of trouble. I myself have found myself in my own trouble because of this. The good news is usually the trouble you find yourself in is the pattern is larger than you really want it to be. And that's good news, because you can fit those issues out during your fitting. I have not encountered myself yet doing this for people, a pair that were not large enough. So that's the good news anyway. That is not true of the upper body. The upper body, if you take measurements wrong there, it really skews out all the calculations and divisions, and you end up with a big mess. So with breeches, usually measuring errors tend to make larger rather than smaller pattern pieces. So that's the I guess confidence booster moving forward here. We will talk about what measurements you need. I'm going to give you a basic instruction on how they're supposed to be taken. Obviously, in the cell phone video on top of a stack of books and a step stool setup I have here, it's not really going to be possible for me to demonstrate to you how to take these measurements. That might be a video we could try to put together in the future with the aid of some friends. But for tonight, we'll just talk about what measurements you need and roughly how they're taken, and from there, we'll get into what you do with those numbers and how we start plotting them on the paper here, as you see. So let's go ahead and scoot the measurement chart into view here. So this is the measurement chart I use whenever I'm measuring for a customer. Obviously we don't need the upper body measures and we don't need the sleeve measures. Those are, null and void here. So we're going to be using that section there, lower body measures. I'm going to leave this on screen long enough, one, for us to talk about it, but two, for you to write these down if you want to do that. But obviously the pause button will be your friend here in this section. You'll notice I have two stars listed there, one next to the small of the knee and one next to the center back. The small of knee measure for what we're doing tonight, we won't be using, because I'm just going to show you how to get the basic block. Depending on how long this video goes, I might show you how to add some details to it, but that's not really going to be our mission tonight. So the small of knee measure, we'll talk about how to take it, but we won't be using it tonight. The center back measure has a star because it's the only measurement that's not taken with your model in a fully upright position. That measurement's taken preferably with them in a crouched position, so that we know how much of the diaper butt in these that we need. That's what that measurement is going to provide us. There is alternatives to doing that if you're dealing with somebody who has mobility issues, for example. We're not going to get into that tonight. But anyway, you'll notice that our primary measures are a waist measure. That is taken around the area that would be sort of right at your hip bones, right at the top of your hip bones. That would be the waist measure that you will take there. Take that measurement with, let's say, 1 or 2 fingers in the measuring tape. You don't want that to be skin tight. We're not going to make a wetsuit here. And of course, with the way the waistbands work, being able to tie in the back, we don't need this to be wetsuit tight. So 1 or 2 fingers in the tape. When you take that, have them take a deep breath. The tape slides a little bit. Go with the largest measurement. It's always easier to take off. The seat measure, this is going to be taken across the buttocks and around the waist all the way to the front. This would be sort of the area for, like, if you had a pair of Levi jeans, it'd be like over the pockets on the jeans and across to the fly front, where your zipper would be that area. The thigh would just kind of be the thickest part of your thigh. The massive knee, this will be the thickest part of the knee. Go ahead and take a measurement around its circumference. Now, the small of the knee would be where the breeches terminate. And when I say the breeches terminate, I mean the knee band itself. So describing where this is below the knee, it could be lower than you're imagining. It could be higher than you're imagining. It sort of depends on the style of breeches you're making. Breeches termination points kind of change a little bit over time. What I find the easiest to do is I will give like a piece of ribbon to my customer, and I'll ask them to tie that below their knee where they would tie a garter, like if they're wearing a pair of leggings or something. And they usually seem to nail the exact spot where you'd want your breeches to terminate when they do that. The out seam is going to be from that sort of hip bone area all the way down to the bottom of where your breeches will terminate. The inseam is the same thing, but it's done on the inner leg. So your tape would start all the way at that high crotch point, right where all the seams would meet on the inside of a pair of jeans. And, we'll follow the inner leg down to the terminating point of your breeches. Now you'll see I have a couple depth measurements here, depth to thigh and depth to massive knee. So when I take the measurement for a thigh and for the massive knee, I'll actually tie a string around my customer's thigh and knee where I take those. And then I will measure down from where I started taking the out seam measurement to that thigh point and that massive knee point. And I'll make note of those measurements there. It makes it easier for me to plot it on the paper, and there's a lot less guesswork with trying to put those horizontal points when we get to the draft. Now the center front measurement, this is taken while the model is fully stood. The measuring tape should go to that center point where you started taking your inseam measurement, that crossroads there of all the seams on a pair of jeans on the inner leg. And the tape should be brought across the front of the crotch and up to the waistline. This measurement I find works best if you take it extremely tight. Pull the tape tight and take that measure. This is one area I have seen consistently when I have taught this to other people. They don't take this tight enough, and our crotch kind of gets messed up in the draft because of that. So this you really want to take tight. The center back is taken sort of the same way the front is, but reversed, right? We're going to measure over the buttocks rather than up the front of the crotch line. This measurement is best taken if you can place your model into a squatted position, which will fully extend the buttocks, and then measure up and over the buttocks to the waistline, and notate that measurement. And that will let us know really how much of the bubble butt that we need to draft into these breeches. We need enough there for people to have a comfortable amount of mobility, but we don't want to have so much that things are just sort of unnecessarily sloppy. So having that measurement is an important one. Now you'll notice I pinned in here crotch depth. I don't have it on the measurement chart because this is something that I just know we have to calculate while we're doing the draft. But the crotch depth measurement is going to be the difference between the outseam and the inseam. So if our outseam is 20 inches and our inseam is 10 inches, the crotch depth is going to be 10 inches. It's the difference between the two. So if you're making notation of these measurements here, that's one that you'll definitely want to notate. When I do it, I just calculate this while doing the draft because I just know it's one of those things that we have to do. But anyway, there you go, crotch depth. It's the difference between the outseam and the inseam. So I believe that pretty much covers all the measurements that we need. Like I said, when I take these though on a customer, and this does help immensely, I will tie a piece of ribbon around their waist so I have a consistent waistline that's going around the body throughout the measuring process. I will tie a piece of string around their thigh, and I will tie a piece of string around their massive knee. And if I am going to take the small of the knee measurement, when I'm doing a full draft, not just a block, I'll tie a piece of string there too. And then I will take a depth to thigh, depth to massive knee, and then I'll also add a depth to, I don't really need to add a depth to small of the knee, do I? Because I have an outseam, but I will double check it while I'm working with the other two depth measurements, just to make absolutely certain that that's where things are. So those are the measurements. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick sort of walkthrough of how we plot all these points to make the front panel, and then we'll talk about making the back panel. Now we do use the front panel to make the back panel, so you're always going to have to draft the front panel of the breeches first. What I'm going to be showing you today is exactly this. This is, I just call this sort of the lower body block. It's not a complete pattern. You'll notice it's sort of lacking all the things that would really make it recognizable as a pattern. If you've bought one before, if you used one before, you'll notice there's a number of things that are missing here, like pocket flaps and fall flap, or a crotch, flap, or, shape in the knee, all the things that you would expect to see in a pattern. So what I do normally is I will make blocks for my customers, and I keep the blocks around, and then I add the details on the fabric. It's easier for me because if I do have a repeat customer, and I do have a few of those, they're not generally ordering the same thing on repeat. So the block system has worked out pretty well for me because it allows me to make sure that all the basic shape and measurements I need for that individual remain the same. And then we can just add the what I call the fluff later, whether they want these to be a fall front, and what type of fall front, and how wide the fall, or inseam pockets, flapped pockets, etc., right? We don't need to have that on the pattern. Now if you're making this for for yourself, or just for somebody that you live with, and you're just going to kind of keep making the same thing over and over again, then yes, add the details and just leave them on your master pattern. This can also be used for making gator trousers, or just regular trousers, because this is the hard part, right? This part of the fit. So this represents just, you know, the waistline to the just below the knee. That's all this represents. But this is the difficult part to fit. I mean, the rest of it's just leg, and leg is pretty easy to deal with, especially if you're just doing normal trousers. So anyway, this is what we're going to do. And so we're going to go ahead and start walking through it. Now you'll notice on the paper I'm going to work with here, I've already kind of pre-plotted some points. That way we don't have to spend all night actually finding all of them. You want to see how we get here, not just watch me doodle unnecessarily. I will say that what we are doing tonight is at quarter scale, and it is from a real set of measurements from a real human. That being said, I selected the measurements and the human to make these plates with because they were fairly normal shaped. Depending on what your measurements are, you may end up with some shapes that are significantly different than what you're going to see in the video. If you follow the instructions, my advice to you would be, even though your heart tells you it's wrong, just trust it and give it a go, and adjust from there. Our eyes are trained to see shapes that existed in a period where people were shaped in a way that we just aren't anymore. And that's just a fact. You know, the number of books that are out there that have, you know, flats of patterns pulled from originals, or even having gone to look at original garments, they are for people who are just not shaped like the vast majority of us. You know, it is actually kind of rare nowadays that we run into an individual that was likely to fit into a lot of the original 18th century things that at least I've seen. They're usually much smaller frames, and their proportions are very different. So we can achieve all of what they were able to achieve. You just kind of have to trust the process, not necessarily your eye, at least until your eye is sort of trained more towards the process, if that makes any sense. Or it could be that your instincts were correct and whatever you drew was just a total disaster and we have to start all over again. But there's only one way to find out, and that's to give it a go. So anyway, here we go. You'll notice all the vertical points on the instructions here are done on letters. All the horizontals are done on numbers, just to kind of keep things organized a little bit better. Okay. So point A is always our starting point, right? You're going to square a line and make sure it is good and square. So point A, this is like our waist point, right? So this is the top of our side seam. That's what point A is. Okay. So the first plot that you're gonna want to throw out there is A to E, and this is going to be your out seam measure. Okay. A to E is the out seam measure. So you go ahead and plot that. Now, A to D, this is going to be our depth to thigh measurement that we talked about. And this is why I take those depth measurements. So that's what that is there. Now, line C is our crotch depth measurement. So this is where I had said before that I kind of penned in that measurement, but you would just calculate this. So your crotch depth is the distance between your inseam and outseam measure. So A to C is the crotch depth, and the crotch depth, once again, is the difference between the outseam and the inseam. So you have to do a little bit of math. B is located directly in the middle of A and C, and this is the line where our seat measure goes. So once you have all those points plotted, you can go ahead and just square lines out from them. And even though I already have the points on the paper, you obviously won't have any of the numbers yet. So just square lines out so that you're able to find points. Now we'll start working our way through the numbers. So A to 1 is going to be 1/4 of your waist measure. 1/4 of your waist measure. So up around your waist area, you're going to have 4 panels that make up your waistline, right? You'll have 2 front panels and 2 back panels. So this will be 1/4 of your waistline, A to 1. Now we come down here to our seat measure line, and B to 2 is going to be 1/4 of the seat measure. Because again, in this upper section here, you'll have 4 panels that wrap around the body. So B to 2 is 1/4 of the seat measure. Now C to 3 gets a little interesting, and this is going to be an area where you have to make a bit of a judgment call. 0.3 kind of just lands where connecting 1 and 2 with a curve lands on the crotch line. So I'm gonna show you what that looks like. So we pull out this little tiny curve. Now in real life, I'm gonna recommend you use like a very curve to do this, but you'll pull a curve out and you'll notice we got from points 1 to 2, right, with the curve, and then we just kind of continue down, and wherever that lands on the crotch line, that's going to be 0.3. Now I said this is going to be an area where you have to make a judgment call, because making this shape and what amount of curve to put into that is either going to require you to look at a number of flats and originals to see how much they put in, or you just having done this a number of times and your eye is able to make that judgment call. It's real easy to draw a line that like really curves out here and gets real sharp, and we don't want like a real sharp point out there. So if you have that, you might need to just play with the line some more and adjust a bit. But anyway, so that's how we find 3. We pull our curve out and we connect 1 to 2 and just sort of finish the line on the curve, and wherever it lands on the crotch line, that's 3. So this is our crotch point here. So this is going to be that area that's between our legs, below our fly, where all of the seams meet, like on your jeans. Now D to 4, this measurement here, now we're in the lower half of the draft. This is going to be 1/2 of the thigh measure. D to 4, 1/2 of the thigh measure. Once you get into the legs, they're only made up of 2 panels, right? The front panel, back panel. So above the crotch line, everything is going to be in quarters. Below the crotch line, everything is going to be in halves. If you mess that up one way or the other, you are going to have one exciting shape, but it will not fit anything. So D to 4 is 1/2 of the thigh measure. Now E to 5 is 1/2 of that mass of knee measurement. Now this would be the total bottom of your breeches, right? So this would be where your knee band would get attached to. And if you remember when I gave you the instructions, you might be thinking to yourself right now, like, well, hey, bro, you already told me that, there's a smaller measurement and that's where the breeches end. Well, that smaller measurement's used to make the knee band, and the knee band is going to be smaller than the bottom of the breeches. That way we can make a little pocket for the knee. So we need that room down here. So all the way at the bottom, E to 5 is going to be 1/2 of the mass of knee measurement. And once you have that plotted, you will take your curve out again and just kind of connect the dots once again. And now we have our inseam. So this is our inseam. This is our outseam. Now, I know we took an inseam measurement, right? I'm not going to tell you to do anything with that inseam measurement as far as your actual inseam draft is concerned. It's just not that important, because this seam is where we're going to do any fitting that we have to do, and we're going to have to do some fitting. I've very rarely drafted up a pair of breeches and felt we don't really have to do anything. I've gotten close with the system on some body shapes, but usually we still have to raise the crotch or do something. So the inseam measurement is really used just for calculating it against the outseam measurement to get our crotch depth. Do not worry about this, because we're going to make adjustments to this line anyways. It's really not that important. So that's the front. That's the front draft. Now the last number we have here is 6, and you can see it's kind of floating up here. Your results are going to vary on where this lands. But you find 6 from 3. So taking that center front measurement, right? The one where I told you to take from that center crotch point below your fly and take it really tight up to the waistline, you're going to apply that number from 3, and you're going to measure up this line, and wherever it lands will be 0.6, and that will be the top of the front of our breeches. Now you need to connect a line from A to 6 with a hip curve. Now, since we're working quarter scale, I just have sort of the one curve that we're going to use for everything. But you want to use a hip curve for this. It's the appropriate tool. And you're going to draw a line from A to 6, and it should be curved something like that. So this is now our waistline. We want that slight curve in it because it's going to wrap around your body. So that's what this is. That's the waistline. Okay. So now I told you we use the front panel to make the back panel, right? So I'm gonna cut that plate apart that we had over here, so that we can keep this for a reference. But you cut the plate out along all the actual outside lines. Okay. So at full scale, you would just cut out your front pattern piece, and then you will use that to make the back draft. All right. Okay, so here we go. We have a front panel, and it matches that. So the only line that you really need to carry over from the front panel is going to be the crotch line. So we're going to put a big C right through it so that we know it's there. So once again, we're going to square a line to make our back draft. You'll see point A has carried over to the front, the new line we push forward. Point C has pushed over for our crotch line, and E has pushed over. Okay. If these lines aren't already extended all the way through, like the bottom is, please go ahead and do that. It'll save you from having to do some other measuring. So again, I have some of the plots kind of already done here, just to speed things up a bit. But what you're going to do is, after you have this squared up and you know where point A is going to be, you're going to place the draft on top of the paper here. Okay, so we have this. Now you see we wanted that crotch line to carry all the way through. So point 3 from the old crotch line also got moved forward. So there it is, right there's point 3. Point A1 up here is just this is for this video. It doesn't exist otherwise. It's just to show you where that 1/4 of the waist measure from A was. So point that plot 1 from the first one, but I made it A1 on here because it doesn't really, you don't need it. It's just to give you some kind of reference. So we have this pattern piece here, okay? And the reason that we carry it over is so that we can give ourselves a little bit of extra stuff that we need for a back panel, but it all be in balance to the front. And the easiest way to do that, excuse me, is just to use the front. So you can plot your total distance from the front panel, and you can plot your crotch depth from the front panel. Now, I'm gonna take this away real quick. So out where point 3 is, which is the crotch point, right? Where that is, I want you to draw a line 1 inch below that, and just kind of give yourself some room to work on. So remember, this is quarter scale, so you can kind of see how big I made that. You have, it'd be a couple inches either direction of 3. Okay. Down here at the corner, this is point E. Let's go ahead and label it on the bottom as well. That's point E. Point E is going to be an important point for us. So there's where you're going to tilt this front panel until, and it's going to pivot on E. Okay, so E is our pivot point. So we're going to tilt this forward until our crotch point hits that line 1 inch down below. Okay, just like it did. You see how it hit the 1 inch down below line? we're stuck at E. That's our pivot point, and the crotch line should carry all the way back up to the crotch line again. And when all those things line up, so you can see crotch point is touching, the crotch line is touching, I'm sorry. The crotch point is touching the line that's 1 inch below where it was, and E is on its pivot point. This is going to now be our new inseam, okay? So you need to trace the inseam. And when I talk about things being in balance, you can see that now the inseams match, right? And you need to trace the bottom of the breeches as well, okay? So now we have a shape that looks something like that. So it is wider than the front panel going up towards the crotch point, okay? So I'm going to show the pivot one more time. So once we're done tracing the things off of the front panel that we need, and we've made a line 1 inch below the original crotch line, we will use point E down here as a pivot point, and we will pivot the pattern piece until the crotch point is touching that line 1 inch down below the original crotch line. We are touching point E because it's our pivot, and the crotch line carries all the way through until it connects to the crotch line again, okay? Trace the inseam, trace the bottom. And that's how we find 0.7 and 0.8. Okay? Now, point A and 0.7 connect at 0.9. Now this makes the back of our breeches. Okay, this makes our like bubble butt area. All right. So the way that we're going to achieve this actually is, and you would need a ruler. I don't have a ruler, so we're just gonna put some hash lines on this, and we're gonna pretend it's a ruler. Okay, so this is our pretend ruler. Just put the hash lines there so you kind of know what it is. Point A up to 0.9 is going to be 1/4 of the waist measure plus 4 or maybe 5 inches. That's a judgment call you're gonna have to make based on the body shape that you're using. Most normal body shapes, 4 inches is gonna be enough. If you want a little bit more bubble butt, 5, but 4 is generally acceptable. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna find what that measurement is, right? So you'll put your ruler, boom, here's our ruler, right? So you're gonna put your ruler up here, and you're gonna find that 1/4 of the waist measure plus 4 inches, and you're gonna kind of just plot some points, all right? And give yourself a chance to like actually locate this thing, right? So you have some dots like that floating up around in Nowhereville. Now 0.7 to 0.9 is going to be that center back measure. So that measure we took from the crotch point while the individual was bent down up and over the buttocks. So that's what 0.7 is to 0.9. So wherever that measurement hits one of these dots, which is the measurement from here, that's the conversion point where these two lines will be. Okay, so you'll end up with something that looks like this. All right, and that's our bubble butt. So this is the basic block. There is one more thing I do on the block though. These two straight lines they're pretty garbage, and they don't help you at all. They don't visually look okay. They don't sew well. So we're gonna add some curve to them, and adding some curve to them is also gonna give us a little bit more fullness. So you're gonna take your curve again. I usually use a hip curve for this, and we're literally just gonna connect the dots with the curve, and what this does is it gives us shape, and a little added fullness. Now this is kind of strange on my small curve here because this thing isn't really like any of the big curves that we use in real life, but you end up with something like that, right? So these will be your new outside lines. And that's it, folks. That's the basic block. Now from here, you can add the details that you would need to make a pair of breeches. So for example, let's say we'll start in the back. You normally need a button stand on the back, right? So you'd have to add that in. So let's say it's, I don't know, your button stand is going to be something like 7 inches up, and you're going to make it, I don't know, 1 inch wide. So you can add a button stand. I kind of like to angle the top of the button stand. So you add that on. Some people will then add they'll add a little thing at the bottom here that protect your breeches from a buckle, so you can add that on there. But before you do that, you're going to want to shape the bottom of the legs. So we could talk about how we do that real quick. A quick and dirty way to do this is sort of find the middle point here between these two things. We're just going to eyeball it. So we'll say that's the middle point. I then reduce this by 1/2 inch up in the back, and then make a curve, right? And that becomes the back leg. And we do the same thing in reverse in the front. We'll find sort of the midpoint, right, which we'll say is there. And then I drop it 1/2 inch, maybe more if the person's got really bony knees. But then that becomes the front drop right in those. So now once you have this in here, then you could, finish adding that, little button stand protector thing that you see sometimes, right, on the bottom of a pair of breeches. You'd want to notch this, in the back where the button stands would match. Sometimes you'd also see a little, protector thing on the front as well. If you wanted to add, a fall front, this would be the time that you do that. So let's say you wanted to have a fall pocket, so you may end up with something that looks, like this for a pocket, right? And then, I don't know, wherever your fall wanted to be, if you want to have a skinnier, fall for an earlier pair of breeches, or you could bring that fall, sort of in front of the pocket for a later pair of breeches, right? Look something like that. If you wanted these to be a fly front, I suggest you sort of straighten this line, a bit more in the front here, a little less curve on it, and then you'd end up with your, your button stand piece, right? That would go onto the front of that. You may end up then with a, much larger pocket. But it really depends, right? You can play with it from here. And that's why I use the block. I think the block is useful in that way. But this is what I actually use whenever I make breeches and cut breeches for customers, or recently having done the sort of pattern service for people when I set the mobile store up. A handful of times I've done that. So it's gotten tested quite a bit, especially because of that. I'm not going to say it's without problems. There's nothing that is without problems. The more typical your body shape, the more easily you will be successful with this. That being said, I've done a lot of atypical bodies with this as well, and it does work. It may just require a bit more fitting. The big detail with this, though, again, I'm going to stress, is measuring. You have to get the measurements right. The biggest one I see is people don't know where these depth points are supposed to be. So, if this is the thigh measure, but you plotted up here, or you plotted it down here, right? I mean, then our leg's either going to scoop in a lot and come down, or it's going to scoop out more. It changes. It's going to change the final shape, which is just going to change how much fitting you have to do. It's not really a big deal. It's usually fixable. I have yet to encounter myself or someone who has at least shown me what they've done using this, where they've made them too small. So that's That's the good news. You can definitely go too short if you don't if you don't take that. But usually too long is what happens. This is why I tie the strings around the certain, around their waist, around their thigh, around the mass of the knee, around the small of the knee, because I want to know where all of that is. So when I go to plot it on the paper, I'm not guessing. I'm knowing. But again, if anything, you're more likely to make them too long, which is, again, not a big deal. Raising breeches is a whole lot easier than dropping breeches, so not such a big deal. Never had an issue with anybody not having enough bubble butt using this method. Sometimes when you're fitting, you will find that you need to take some out of the back panel without taking any out of the front panel. Like the front leg will fit fine, but the back leg up in this area in particular will get taken in. And then when you go to sort of proof your pattern, you'll end up with this shape that looks sort of more like this. It looks really kind of funky. But if that's how it ends up fitting, it's how it ends up fitting. It's not what it looks like when it's flat doesn't really matter, right? It's what it looks like when it's on the person. I would say it's a regular occurrence, but not every time. So there's just certain body shapes that seem to make certain things happen, and others that don't. But I hope you find it's useful. I hope it's more useful than the first video that we did. I've been using this for a long time now. It's been a number of years since we put the first video up. A lot of lessons learned, a lot of mistakes made. I just didn't, in the long term, I didn't find it all that beneficial trying to do the whole seat triangle measuring thing. It does work, but it's just another one of those, like, if you don't get the measurements correct, it's kind of a mess. And it's easy to not get the measurements correct, especially in the lower half of the body, and especially for something like breeches, because they're just kind of an odd garment to begin with. And measuring the lower body is very challenging. There's a lot of curves and odd shapes and weird movements that your extremities make down there. And then there's just the awkward bit of measuring in and around the crotch point. It can make the person you're measuring a little uncomfortable, which may change, the way that they're carrying themselves. It can make you a little uncomfortable if you don't do it often, which may change how much you're actually really focusing on the measurement you're taking. That front center measurement, coming up and over the fly, take it tight. I'm telling you, take it tight. If you end up with this point being too high, you really shouldn't ever, unless, I shouldn't say never, because that's not true. I've seen this, but for most people of a normal shape, it should be below plot 1 here. I have had a few customers where it came above 1 and then curved the other direction back, and it worked, right? It's a very odd shape. It looks nothing like any of the things you'll see in a book, but it worked. Now you'll notice we haven't done a waistband here. The waistband's it's really simple. You take 1/2 of the waist measurement, and then I subtract like 3/4 of an inch from that, so that we have enough to like tighten it up, and then just make the shape of the waistband that you want with some curve from halfway through. So I mean, we won't use any real measurements here, but we'll say like that's the whole length of a waistband. Okay, so we'll square up in the front, right? Square up in the front, we'll square up in the back. Okay, the back will get raised at least an inch, and we'll do that curve from the halfway point. Okay, here, so it gets raised up. This is the center back. This is the center front. Okay, waistband. So we'll raise it up at least an inch in the back, maybe more, depending on the body shape. And from the halfway point, we'll start that curve. So it'll look something like that. We'll pick how high we want the front to be, and we'll make it just square And then in the front, I will add a little reduction, usually something like 1/2 inch from the top. So my front edge actually ends up slightly curved. And then so this would be where our buttons are, and this would be where our ties are on the back, and that's it. That's a waistband. It's quick, dirty, and easy. From there, again, fluff it, right? Some breeches have a little curve, there, rather than being squared off. Some don't. Blah 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 blah. Some of these are really skinny. Some of these are wider. You could almost do this whole thing sort of backwards if you have to accommodate for somebody's belly. There's a number of things that you could have to do here. Wait, the knee band's the same thing. So the knee band, it's just going to be the small of knee measure, then add enough for whatever closure you're using, right? So if you're going to button closure, add enough for a buttonhole and button stand. If you're doing a buckle closure, add enough to lace through a buckle on the front and put the buckle on the back. And then the idea is that you would ease that smaller number into the bigger number across the front, and that'll make like a little pocket for the knee to articulate. But we talk about that if we do any more construction videos. But anyway, there you go. So this is how I draft for my customers. Looks like we're coming up on just about an hour for the video. It's a little bit longer than I would have liked, but I hope you find it useful. If any of you play around with it and you have success or failure, feel free to reach out like always. I do enjoy hearing from people when they try these things, and I do enjoy trying to help everybody as much as I can. I know learning stuff can be a challenge, and getting access to information is a bit of a nightmare sometimes. So I will get back to you eventually. It may take a while. You may catch me at 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm not doing much of anything other than reading deserter ads or something, waiting to go to bed, and then I see your message and I'll get back to you right away. It just kind of depends, but I will get back to you eventually, one way or the other. So I look forward to hearing from you guys, and if catch you the next time we find a reason to make another video. I hope everybody has a wonderful day, week, month, summer. Happy 250th. Rock and roll, man.